Hello and welcome to this video on how to fix or at least take advantage of your scarred bonsai. Scarring is nearly always a product of wire digging into your tree. This damages the bark and in severe cases the cambium. When this happens, it can cause something similar to a tourniquet. That is, it cuts off the flow of sap and the associated branches will die. When you wire a tree, it should be done in a particular way. It winds around the branch at a 45-degree angle and just touches the trunk or branch. It should not be too tight, but close enough to provide structure. This means that small amounts of growth will not cause the branch to expand and be damaged by the wire cutting into it. This damage can take years to heal. That is, a lot of years in some species that are very slow growing. As a result, avoidance is the best solution. The first situation you find yourself in is where this does not happen. You may have tightened the wire too much. The tree might be a very vigorous grower. You might well have forgotten to take the wire off this year. No matter which it is, your tree has been cut into. This leaves very unappealing lines spiraling on your tree. With some species, you can actually use this to some effect. That is, certain species such as corky oak, elm and pines that have a very craggy surface. Their bark is incredibly rough. It won't look amiss if you leave it like this. The first scars aren't particularly good, mostly because they are very consistent and they're clearly artificial, but they can be made good. Wires wound slightly more tightly in the opposite direction can create a crisscross pattern. With the species that we mentioned, this accentuates the natural appearance of that rough, craggy bark. Over time, the scars will heal, and the tree will go back to an appearance that is all natural. Unless you know what you're looking for, and in some cases are aware of the damage, it may not even be perceptible. When you can't use this method, you need to avoid or prevent more damage. As with the first method, you need to wire your tree in the opposite direction to the existing damage. If you were going to wire the tree in the same direction, the wire could cause damage in the same way, which is worse. It can also cut into the trunk, which exacerbates the existing damage. The existing damage creates a small ridge line. This keeps the wire away from the trunk if wired in the opposite direction. This reduces the pressure and chances of damaging the tree again. In the worst case scenario, your wire can fill the scar, thereby preventing it from healing if you follow the same line that led to the original damage. You can mitigate that somewhat by using larger wire that won't fit into that scar. In other cases, it's simply easier to make sure you do not tighten the wire hard against your branch when wiring both in the original direction and if you need to wire in the opposite direction. Finally, a sacrifice branch is sometimes a good solution, particularly if damage is to the trunk. Some species will put on a lot of growth very quickly with a sacrifice branch. This growth more or less forces the scar out and overcomes it much more quickly. Where some species will take many years, these can often achieve the same effect in only a few short years. Rather than wait a decade, you may only have to let the tree grow for 2 or 3 years. The sacrifice branch will encourage that growth in size and is one of the easier methods. If you are still unable to deal with the scarring, sometimes you need to accept defeat. When this happens, you can prune your tree, but do not put any wire on the bonsai in the areas that have been damaged. You will simply have to accept that training branches and styling will take longer, as your only option is to cut branches that aren't growing where you want them. After a few years, you can begin wiring those sections again, and hopefully with a little more care and attention, you can avoid the damage. The best solution is just to always be aware of the wire on your bonsai. If you let it go, it will scar the tree. prevention is the best solution. Knowing which of your trees and which species in general are vigorous growers is one of the easiest ways to prevent this. Those are the trees you need to check most frequently. Even then, there's a chance of some damage, but if it's a vigorous grower, those species are more likely to respond well to treatment and heal the scarring much quicker. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions that you have below.